My fiancé called 911. My lover stopped breathing. He didn't know I was the dispatcher on the line. Ambulance dispatched, I said, my voice steady, professional, stripped of anything human. And then, without telling him, I dispatched a moving truck to our apartment. I've been a 911 dispatcher for 6 years, long enough to learn how to sound calm when everything inside you is screaming, long enough to separate panic from protocol, emotion from action. You don't gasp, you don't hesitate, you ask the questions, send the help, stay on the line. That afternoon, middle of my shift, the call came through. 911, what's your emergency? Oh God, she's not breathing. I think she's having a heart attack. I recognized his voice instantly, my fiancé. He didn't recognize mine. On emergency calls, voices blur. Panic changes everything. I stayed in professional mode. I had to. Sir, I need you to stay calm. What's your location? He gave me an address I didn't know. Not our place. Not anywhere near it. Who's not breathing, sir? My friend. She collapsed. Please hurry. Friend. I walked him through CPR while units were already on the way. My voice was clinical, precise, trained. But my mind was racing because he had kissed me goodbye that morning, told me he had meetings all day, promised we'd talk wedding details that night, and now he was in some random apartment, panicking over another woman. When the medics arrived, he thanked me and hung up. I sat there for 10 seconds, maybe less. Then I asked my supervisor for an early lunch. Family emergency. He looked at my face and didn't ask questions. I drove home to the apartment we'd shared for 2 years. The apartment where our wedding invitations were still stacked on the counter. I called a friend with a moving truck. I need someone packed up, fast. By the time my fiancé got home that night, everything that was his was gone. I was sitting on the couch, waiting. He smiled when he walked in. Hey, babe, sorry I'm late. That's funny, I said softly, because you called 911 at 2:14 p.m. from an apartment I've never heard of, reporting that your friend wasn't breathing. His face went completely white. I was your dispatcher, I continued. Small world, right? I slid a storage unit key across the table. We're done. And that was only the beginning. We didn't meet in some dramatic, movie-worthy way. No spilled drinks, no instant fireworks, just a mutual friend's birthday dinner, a long table, dim lighting, and a conversation that kept stretching past everyone else's attention span. He sat across from me, leaning forward when I spoke, like what I was saying mattered. That alone felt rare. At the time, my life revolved around schedules measured in seconds. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, whenever people needed help the most. Being a 911 dispatcher doesn't leave much room for spontaneity. You don't just pop out for late dinners or weekend trips. You live on alarms, voices, and other people's emergencies. He understood that, or at least he said he did. He worked in marketing, a coordinator at a mid-sized company downtown. Normal hours, office gossip, meetings that could have been emails, a world completely different from mine, but not incompatible. He liked that I was steady. I liked that he seemed grounded. Our first few months were easy. Texts during my breaks, coffee waiting for me when I got off a night shift. He'd sit on the couch while I decompressed, listening without trying to fix anything. When I couldn't talk, he didn't push. That's how trust starts, quietly. A year in, we moved in together. My apartment, my lease. We said we'd add his name later, but never rushed it. He paid utilities and groceries. I covered rent. It felt balanced, adult, simple. We talked about the future the way couples do when they assume alignment is guaranteed. Marriage, kids, someday, a house that wasn't too far from my job. He said he admired my calm under pressure. I said I admired his optimism. It felt complementary, like we filled each other's gaps. The proposal came 8 months before the wedding date we'd circled on the calendar. No crowd, no spectacle, just us, a quiet evening, and a ring he'd clearly saved for. When he asked, his voice shook just a little. I said yes, without hesitation. I believed him. Wedding planning slid easily into our routine. Venue calls on my days off, guest lists over dinner, engagement photos that made us look happier than I even remembered feeling in the moment. Our families met. His parents liked me well enough, though his mother had a way of asking questions that felt more like assessments. You're very composed, she once said. I hope you're warm enough for him. I smiled, explained my job again, let it go. Looking back, there were small things, not red flags, more like flickers. His phone always face down. Work events that ran late more often than before. a habit of picking arguments before going out with friends, then apologizing the next morning like nothing had happened. I noticed, I just didn't interrogate it. Because when you listen to other people's worst moments for a living, you learn how easy it is to see ghosts where there are none. You learn restraint. You learn not to jump to conclusions without evidence. So I trusted the man who kissed my forehead before work, the man who talked about our future in plural terms, the man who slipped the ring on my finger and promised a life built on honesty. I trusted him because nothing had forced me not to, until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon did exactly that. The first real crack didn't come with a fight. It came with silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that sits between two people who know each other well enough not to fill every gap. This was different. This was absence. Replies that took hours instead of minutes. Conversations that stayed on the surface like he was afraid of sinking too deep. I told myself it was stress. Wedding planning does that to people. Work deadlines pile up. Family opinions creep in. Everyone starts projecting expectations onto a future that hasn't happened yet. I'd heard it all before, from callers, from friends, from coworkers who'd been married longer than I'd been dispatching emergencies. So when he said, "Sorry, today was just insane," I nodded and let it go. But patterns don't lie, they just wait. His phone was always on silent now, not just during dinner, always. Screen down, notifications hidden. If it buzzed, he'd glance at it quickly, then tuck it back into his pocket like nothing happened. One night I asked casually, "Everything okay at work?" "Yeah," he said too fast. "Why?" "No reason." He smiled, leaned over, kissed my temple. End of conversation. Another time he canceled dinner last minute. "Work thing," he said. "Client ran late." I reheated leftovers alone, scrolling through photos from our engagement shoot. His arm around me, my head tilted against his shoulder. We looked solid, certain. I wondered if that certainty had expired without me noticing. Then there were the arguments, small, irrational ones, about nothing, about dishes left in the sink, about how I phrased a question, about my tone. They always happened before he went out. "You're being cold," he snapped once, grabbing his jacket. "I'm asking a question," I replied, confused. "See? That tone." The door slammed before I could respond. He'd come home later, softer, apologetic. I shouldn't have snapped. I'm just under a lot of pressure. I accepted it, again. Because here's the thing about my job. I hear real emergencies. Screaming. Loss. Lives collapsing in real time. Compared to that, relationship friction feels manageable, minor, not worth escalating. I didn't want to become suspicious without cause. I didn't want to be the kind of woman who interrogates her partner over vibes and instincts. So I adjusted. I stopped asking follow-up questions. I stopped pointing out inconsistencies. I stopped trusting my own discomfort. There was one moment, small enough that I almost forgot it, that stuck with me later. I came home early from a shift swap and heard him laughing in the bedroom. Not on the phone, on speaker. A woman's laugh floated out, light and familiar. When I stepped into the doorway, he turned it off too quickly. "Who was that?" I asked. "Work," he said. "Group chat." I looked at him. He looked back, unbothered. Didn't sound like work. "You're reading into it." And just like that, the burden shifted. Not to him, for hiding, but to me, for noticing. I let it drop, again. Because I loved him. Because I trusted the history we had built. Because I believed that if something were truly wrong, I would know. I didn't realize I already did. I just didn't have proof yet. And in my world, proof is everything. The day everything detonated started like any other. Morning light through the blinds. Coffee brewing. The familiar rhythm of two people moving around the same space without needing to speak much. He kissed my cheek as he grabbed his bag. "Long day," he said. "Meetings back to back." "Text me when you're done," I replied. "I will." He left. The door closed. Nothing felt off enough to stop him. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alarms. At 2:14 p.m., I was midway through my shift. 911, what's your emergency? Oh God, she's not breathing. I think she's having a heart attack or something. I knew the voice instantly. My fiancé. He didn't know mine. On emergency calls, voices flatten, panic strips away familiarity, and dispatchers don't sound like themselves. We sound like procedures. "Sir, I need you to stay calm. What's your location?" He gave an address across town. An apartment I had never heard of. "Who's not breathing, sir?" My friend, she just collapsed. Please hurry." Friend. My hands didn't shake. Training took over. That's what 6 years does to you. Is she conscious? No. Is she breathing at all? I don't think so. Her chest isn't moving. I'm dispatching an ambulance now. Stay on the line with me. As units rolled, I guided him through CPR, counted compressions, corrected hand placement, kept my tone calm and neutral, even as my mind sprinted ahead of my body. He was supposed to be at work. He told me that morning he had a full day of meetings. He worked in marketing, office job, predictable hours. So why was he panicking over another woman in a random apartment? Help is arriving now, I said once medics confirmed on scene. They'll take over. Thank you, he breathed. Thank you so much. The line went dead. I sat there for 10 seconds, maybe less. Then I raised my hand. I need to take an early lunch, family emergency. My supervisor looked at me carefully. We'd worked together for years. You okay? We will be. I just need an hour. He nodded. Take 2. I clocked out, got in my car, and drove home to the apartment we'd shared for 2 years. The apartment where wedding planning binders still sat on the kitchen counter. The apartment where I thought I knew exactly who I lived with. On the way, I called a friend who owned a moving company. I need a favor, I said, right now. What's up? Relationship emergency. I need someone packed fast. No questions. I can have a truck there in 45 minutes. I started with the bedroom. His clothes went into suitcases pulled from the closet, shoes into boxes, toiletries from the bathroom, his laptop, his books, anything that was clearly his. No hesitation, no dramatics. By the time the moving truck arrived, my decision was already made. Where am I taking this? The driver asked. A storage unit, I replied, texting him the address. I'd rented it online while packing. $89 for the first month. Worth it. By 4:30 p.m., the apartment was empty of him. Quieter, cleaner, different. I went back to work, finished my evening shift, clocked out at 11 o'clock p.m. He got home at 11:47. I was sitting on the couch, lights on, waiting. He walked in, saw me, smiled like everything was normal. Hey, babe, sorry I'm late. Work dinner ran long. That's funny, I said calmly, because you called 911 at 2:14 this afternoon from an apartment I've never heard of, reporting that your friend wasn't breathing. His face drained of color. I what? I was your dispatcher, I continued. Small world, huh? He froze. She okay, by the way? I added. Your friend. The medics got there pretty fast. That wasn't, I can explain. Cool, I said. While you do that, let me explain something. I slid a key across the coffee table. Your stuff is in a storage unit, Unit 247. First month's paid. After that, you're on your own. You can't just... I can, and I did. This is my apartment. My name is on the lease. Where am I supposed to go? Not my problem anymore. He tried tears next, then apologies, then pleading. I didn't move. I pulled the engagement ring off my finger, the ring he had saved months for, and placed it on the table. We're done, I said. You need to leave. And for the first time all day, my heart finally caught up with reality. The door slammed so hard the wall vibrated. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the space where he had been standing, listening to the echo fade. Then there was a knock from next door, soft, cautious. Everything okay? The neighbor asked through the door. Yeah, I replied evenly. Just a breakup. He hesitated, then left. The hallway went quiet again. That was when my hands started shaking. Not during the call. Not while I packed. Not when I told him to leave. Now. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs and focused on breathing. In through my nose, out through my mouth. The same grounding technique I give callers when they're spiraling. You're safe, you're in control, stay present. My phone lit up before midnight. His mother. I let it ring. Then his sister. Then a number I didn't recognize. Then another. By the time I set my phone face down, it felt like it was vibrating from sheer insistence. I slept maybe 3 hours. The next morning, I woke up to messages accusing me of cruelty, of overreacting, of throwing away something fixable without letting him explain. I didn't respond. Because here's the thing. He didn't call 911 to confess. He didn't call to end the affair. He called because he had no choice, because the woman he was sleeping with stopped breathing. If I hadn't been the dispatcher, he would have gone home that night, kissed me, and continued lying. That mattered. By noon, his mother finally left a voicemail. How dare you kick my son out in the middle of the night? He had nowhere to go. You humiliated him. I called her back. Your son left at 11:47 p.m., I said calmly. Hardly midnight. He wasn't in danger. I was sitting on my couch. He said it was just a friend from college. They were studying. Ma'am, I replied, keeping my voice level. He called 911 because she stopped breathing. That's not studying. Silence. You've always been cold, she snapped finally. He told me you never showed emotion. I'm a 911 dispatcher, I said. I'm trained not to panic. That doesn't make me cold. She hung up on me. I blocked her number. Then came the mutual friends. We had 6 couples we saw regularly, dinners, birthdays, game nights. He got to 3 of them first, told them I was controlling, that the woman really was just a friend who had a medical emergency, that I used my job to spy on him. The other 3 called me directly. I told them the truth, exactly what happened, that he lied about where he was that day, that he called emergency services from a random apartment while claiming to be at work. They believed me, because facts don't need embellishment. Work was harder. On my next shift, my supervisor pulled me aside. "So," he said carefully, "we got a complaint." I didn't blink. "Let me guess, his lawyer? Claims you violated protocol, accessed a 911 call inappropriately." "I didn't access anything," I said. "I answered the call. Random assignment." "I know," he said. "Legal knows. But we have to investigate. You're not in trouble." "How long?" "Week, maybe 2. Desk duty for now." I nodded. "That's fine." The investigation took 11 days. They reviewed everything: call logs, recordings, dispatch notes, confirmed I followed protocol, stayed professional, did my job. The complaint was dismissed. And then the truth kept unraveling. The woman, the friend, was fine. Heart palpitations, panic attack. Triggered by guilt. Her husband found the text 2 days later. He called me. "My wife was sleeping with your fiancé," he said. "I just found out." We talked for 20 minutes. He told me they'd been seeing each other for 6 months. 6 months! While we were planning a wedding. That was when the hurt finally landed. Not as chaos. As clarity. 6 months. That number sat in my chest like a weight I couldn't dislodge. Not because I didn't already know what it meant, but because of everything it covered. Holidays, family dinners, venue deposits, engagement photos, nights he came home late and kissed me like nothing was wrong. 6 months of deliberate choices. After the call with his affair partner's husband ended, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The apartment was too quiet now. No footsteps, no hum of someone else's life moving around mine, just the refrigerator buzzing and my own breathing. I didn't cry. I felt reorganized, like my mind had taken all the chaos and snapped it into place. The first time he came back was 2 days later. He texted first. "I need to grab a few things I forgot." I replied once. "Make a list. I'll leave them outside." He sent the list. I boxed everything neatly. 3 boxes, labeled. I set them by the dumpster, texted him they were there, then locked the door. He picked them up without a word. The second time he didn't text. He showed up. Saturday, 7:00 p.m. I was eating dinner when the knock came. Sharp, insistent, familiar. I didn't open the door. "I know you're in there," he said through the wood. His voice sounded raw. "Please, we need to talk about this like adults." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied evenly. "You won't even listen to my side?" "Your side is that you slept with a married woman twice a week for 6 months while planning our wedding," I said. "What else is there?" "It wasn't like that," he insisted. "It just happened." "For 6 months?" I asked. "On a schedule?" Silence. "I love you," he said finally. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I replied, repeatedly. "That's not a mistake. That's a pattern." "Please," he said. "We can go to counseling. We can fix this." "No," I said. "I'm good." I closed the door. He stood out there for a few minutes, yelling my name, promising change, begging for another chance. Then he left. Later that night, his sister texted me. "You're being cruel. Everyone makes mistakes. You're destroying his life." I blocked her. The ring situation came next. I took it to the jeweler a few days later. They explained their return policy, 90 days. They offered store credit, about $1,400. On the way home, I stopped and bought my dad a watch for his birthday. Something solid, reliable, something that would last. At least someone would get something good out of all this. Then came the financial threats. He started claiming he deserved compensation, that he'd paid half the rent for 2 years, that I was stealing from him. We had an arrangement. I paid rent. He paid utilities and groceries. It balanced out. I told him to sue me if he wanted. He didn't, because the lease was in my name, always had been. He'd never officially been added. That turned out to be the smartest non-decision I ever made. But escalation doesn't always come directly. Sometimes it comes sideways. He started showing up at my workplace. The first time, security stopped him before he reached my floor. Badge access did its job, but he caused enough of a scene that my supervisor had to come get me. "He says he needs to talk to you," my supervisor said quietly. "I can have security escort him out." "Give me 5 minutes," I said. I went down to the lobby. He was pacing, hair uncombed, eyes tired, his composure gone. "You told him," he accused the moment he saw me. "Told who?" "Her husband. You ruined everything." "I didn't tell anyone," I replied. If he found out, it's because you weren't as careful as you thought. She's losing everything, he said. Her kids, her marriage, and you don't care. She should have thought about that before sleeping with an engaged man for 6 months, I said calmly. You're heartless. You keep saying that, I replied. It doesn't make it true. Security approached. He saw them and stormed out, yelling that I'd regret this. A few days later, I found out what really happened with his job. He claimed he'd been fired because of me. That wasn't true. He quit. Turns out his affair partner worked at the same company, different department. When her husband filed for divorce and named him, word spread. The gossip became unbearable. He chose to leave. His choice, not my problem. Then the messages started. Unknown numbers. You'll pay for ruining his life. He loved you and you threw him away. Hope you can live with yourself. I blocked them. More came. Different numbers. Same tone. Friends of his, I assumed. Then my car was vandalized. I came out after a shift and saw the word cheater carved into the driver's side door. Deep scratches. Not subtle, not accidental. Repair estimate, $800. I filed a police report. You think it was him? The officer asked. Either him or someone close to him, I replied. I'm documenting everything. Smart, he said. If it escalates, come back. It did. My landlord called. Someone reported a domestic disturbance at your apartment, he said. Multiple complaints. Yelling, aggressive behavior. I laughed once. Short, sharp. I broke up with my fiancé 3 weeks ago, I said. He keeps showing up. I tell him to leave. There's no violence. The complaints say otherwise. Check the hallway cameras, I said. He did. The footage showed exactly what I said. Him showing up, me telling him to leave, him yelling, me closing the door. You're clear, my landlord said. But if this continues, you may need a restraining order. I can't have this disruption. I understood. That night, I started looking for a new place. Seriously, because escalation isn't just about conflict. It's about deciding how much more of it you're willing to tolerate. I thought I was handling it well. That's what everyone kept saying. My supervisor, my coworkers, even the few friends who hadn't swallowed his version of events. You're so calm, one of them told me over coffee. If that were me, I'd be losing my mind. I nodded like calm was a compliment. But calm is also a disguise. In my job, calm means you're functioning. It means you're useful. It means you can still do the next thing. Calm doesn't mean you're okay. It just means you're trained not to fall apart in public. The first time I realized I wasn't okay was on a random night shift when a call came in from a woman sobbing so hard she could barely speak. He said he'd stop, she gasped. He said he loved me, and now he's back. He's banging on the door. Please. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My voice came out steady. Ma'am, I'm here with you. Tell me your address. She gave it. I dispatched units, asked the questions. Stayed professional. But my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain, like her fear had reached through the line and grabbed something inside me. Because I knew that feeling. Someone outside your door. Someone refusing to accept no. Someone trying to force their way back into your life because they don't believe your boundaries count. When the call ended, I stared at the blank screen for a second too long. My supervisor noticed. You good? He asked quietly. Yeah, I lied. That night, when I got home, my apartment felt unfamiliar. Same furniture, same walls. But the air was different, like everything was holding its breath. I locked the door, checked it twice. Then I checked the window latches. Then I stood in the middle of my living room and realized my heart was racing like I'd just run upstairs. Nothing was happening, and that was the terrifying part. I couldn't turn it off. I tried to sleep, but every sound felt like a warning. The refrigerator clicking, a car door outside, footsteps in the hallway. I kept picturing him showing up again, pounding on the door, screaming my name, making the neighbors stare. I kept picturing the word carved into my car. Cheater. Like he could rewrite reality just by engraving it into metal. My phone buzzed at 3:17 a.m. A voicemail. It was his mother. I'd blocked her number, but she found a way. Some unknown line, some workaround. Her voice was sharp and theatrical, like she was performing grief. You are ruining my son's life. He made one mistake and you're punishing him forever. He's staying with me because he has nowhere to go. He's depressed. He's not eating. This is your fault. You need to forgive him and work this out. That's what adults do. I listened to the whole thing without moving. When it ended, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall until the sun started lightening the room. One mistake. That phrase kept looping in my head like an insult. Because it wasn't one mistake. It was 6 months, twice a week, planning a wedding, smiling in photos, sleeping beside me like he hadn't been inside someone else's marriage. And now he wanted to be the victim. He wanted me to carry the guilt. That was when something cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were rimmed red from lack of sleep. My face looked older than it had a month ago. I pressed my fingertips to the sink, grounding myself, and whispered, "You did the right thing." But my voice shook, because the dark moment isn't when you miss him. It's when you miss the version of your life you believed you had. The wedding that was supposed to happen in 8 months. The future you mentally rehearsed. The security of we. The comfort of someone else's breathing in the apartment. I didn't want him back. I wanted my certainty back. I wanted to stop replaying the call in my head. His panic, the address, the lie wrapped in the word friend. I wanted to stop wondering how many times I'd kissed him after he'd been with her. How many times I'd touched his face without knowing what he'd done hours earlier. Who knows if either of them had been safe? The thought made my stomach turn. I sat on the kitchen floor that morning, back against the cabinet, and let myself feel it. Anger, grief, disgust, humiliation, all of it flooding in at once, no longer contained by training or logic. For the first time since the 911 call, I cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears that made my throat ache. And in that silence, I realized something that scared me more than the cheating itself. He didn't just betray me. He tried to punish me for refusing to accept it. The turning point didn't come with new information. It came with acceptance. I already knew everything that mattered. The timeline, the lies, the 6 months, twice a week, the way my life had been folded neatly around a secret that was never mine to carry. There was nothing left to uncover. And once I understood that, the noise in my head finally stopped. For days after the last confrontation, I kept expecting some emotional reckoning, rage, despair, a collapse I couldn't outrun. Instead, what settled in was something quieter. Certainty. I stopped replaying the 911 call in my mind, stopped dissecting his tone, his panic, the address he gave me. I didn't need to analyze it anymore. The call had already done its job. It had stripped the situation of ambiguity. No explanations required. I realized then that I wasn't waiting for closure. I was waiting for permission to move on, to disengage, to stop defending a decision that had already saved me. Once I saw that, I stopped explaining myself to anyone. When unknown numbers texted, I blocked them without reading. When friends hinted that I might regret being so firm, I changed the subject. When his name crossed my mind, it didn't come with longing, just distance. Physical, emotional, intentional distance. I made practical changes. Quiet ones, the kind that don't announce themselves. I logged every interaction, saved every voicemail, kept records, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. I updated my landlord, adjusted my routines, requested a different parking area at work for a while. Not because I was scared, because I was done being reactive. I booked a therapy appointment, not to process heartbreak, but to recalibrate my sense of normal, to make sure I didn't mistake endurance for strength again. The therapist listened, then said something that settled into me like truth. You didn't lose control, you reclaimed it. That was it. Not vengeance, not validation. Control. 2 days later, he tried one last time. He showed up at my building. I didn't answer. I watched through the door camera as he stood there, checking his phone, shifting his weight, knocking once. Not aggressively, not dramatically. Almost politely, as if courtesy could rewrite history. He texted, "Please, I just want to talk." I didn't respond. 10 minutes passed. Then he left, and with him went the last thread of obligation I'd been carrying. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt finished. The power he'd been trying to regain through guilt, through family pressure, through persistence, evaporated the moment I stopped engaging. That was the turning point, not a confrontation, a decision. I chose stillness over chaos, boundaries over explanations, my future over someone else's discomfort. And for the first time since the call, I slept without waiting for the next shoe to drop. The fallout didn't arrive as chaos. It settled, slow, heavy, and unavoidable, like dust after a collapse. By the time everything went quiet between us, the consequences were already unfolding elsewhere. The affair was no longer a secret. It had moved beyond whispers and denial into documentation. Lawyers handled what emotions couldn't. Timelines replaced excuses. What had once been hidden inside private spaces was now part of an official record. I wasn't asked to participate, and for the first time since this began, that distance felt intentional, not isolating. Socially, things shifted in subtle ways. People chose sides without announcing it. Invitations stopped coming from some circles. Group chats grew silent. A few friendships dissolved without confrontation, as if the absence itself was explanation enough. I didn't chase them. The ones who stayed didn't demand updates or explanations. They didn't ask me to soften my language or reconsider my boundaries. They treated me like someone who had made a difficult but reasonable decision. That mattered more than loyalty ever could. At work, life stabilized into routine. The investigation was closed. I was back on full rotation. Calls came in as they always had. People in crisis, people needing calm, people trusting a stranger on the other end of the line to guide them through their worst moments. I noticed something unexpected. I was better at it. More patient, less reactive, more grounded in the reality that actions ripple outward long after decisions are made. My supervisor checked in once, casually. "You holding up?" "Yes," I said, and meant it. Home, however, felt different. Not unsafe, just saturated. Every room carried echoes, conversations that never happened, plans that no longer applied, a future that had existed only because I'd believed in it. When my landlord reached out again, his tone was neutral but firm. "I need stability in this building," he said. "If disruptions continue, I'll need formal action taken. This isn't sustainable." I understood immediately. This place had served its purpose. But it wasn't where I was going next. That night, I started looking for apartments. Not impulsively, methodically, somewhere closer to work, somewhere smaller, somewhere that hadn't witnessed the unraveling of a life I no longer wanted. The decision didn't feel like loss. It felt like alignment. Therapy became part of my weekly rhythm, not as damage control, but as calibration. I wanted to understand how I'd learned to tolerate discomfort in the name of stability, how I'd mistaken familiarity for safety, how easily women are encouraged to smooth over fractures instead of honoring the moment something breaks. The therapist said something that stayed with me. Fallout feels worse when you're the one who stops holding everything together, but that doesn't mean you caused it. That reframed everything. I hadn't detonated anything. I had stepped out of the blast radius. As weeks passed, the urgency faded. The story stopped being new. People moved on to other conversations, other dramas, other lives. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was spacious. By the time my lease renewal notice arrived, my answer was already clear. I declined. I signed a new lease shortly after. 1 bedroom, shorter term, closer to work. Temporary in the best way. The fallout continued elsewhere, but it no longer touched me. I had stopped absorbing impact for decisions that were never mine. And for the first time since everything collapsed, that felt like peace. The ending didn't feel dramatic. It felt clean. I moved into the new apartment a few weeks later. 1 bedroom, fewer boxes, no shared memories tucked into corners. Just my furniture, my routines, and the quiet I'd been craving without knowing how to name it. Nothing followed me there. No explanations, no apologies, no last attempts to rewrite the story. The noise faded on its own. Work became an anchor. Calls kept coming, people in panic, in pain, in moments where everything feels like it's falling apart. I listened. I guided. I stayed steady. Strangely, I was better at it than before. Not because I'd hardened, but because I understood something I hadn't before. Clarity is a form of compassion. You can be calm without being numb, firm without being cruel. Therapy helped me put language to what I'd done. I hadn't ended a relationship impulsively. I hadn't overreacted. I had responded to reality. And that matters. The therapist said something I'll carry with me. "You didn't lose a future, you exited a lie." That reframed everything. I stopped seeing the engagement as something that was taken from me. I started seeing it as something that protected me from years of doubt, from gaslighting, from building a life on half-truths. I don't hate him. Hate would mean I'm still tethered. What I feel is distance and relief. I'm not dating yet. Maybe next year, maybe later. There's no rush when your life finally feels like it belongs to you. Most evenings are quiet. I cook dinner. I sit on the couch. I let the day end without needing to brace for what might come next. Some people would call that boring. I call it peaceful. The 911 call didn't destroy my life. It clarified it. No ambiguity, no spin, just his voice, panicked over another woman, while I listened from the other end of the line. That was enough. If you're listening to this and standing at your own breaking point, trust what you know. Don't let anyone convince you that protecting yourself is cruelty. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're permissions. I chose myself. I protected my future. And I moved on. If you stayed until the end, thank you for listening. Stories like this aren't about revenge or winning. They're about recognizing the moment when silence becomes self-betrayal and choosing to stop, If this resonated with you, or if you've lived through something similar, you're not alone. Feel free to share your thoughts or your story in the comments. I read them, and I know others do too. If this video helped you see something more clearly about boundaries, trust, or choosing yourself, please give it a like. It helps this story reach people who might need it right now. And if you want more long-form, emotionally honest storytelling like this, subscribe to the channel. New stories every week. Take care of yourself. Trust what you know. And remember, you don't need permission to protect your life.